Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another stream. Today's stream is going to be less of a lecture. I'm not prepared for a lecture. It's going to be more of a demonstration of inking, and I am planning on both demonstrating inking and fielding questions about finishing sketches and starting inking while I do the same in this picture right here. So yeah, welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. So one of the things that I've done here is I've set up two layers. One of them is an organic inking layer and one of them is a mechanical inking layer. In Clip Studio Paint, these are two different types of layer. One of them is raster and one of them is a vector. And the vector stuff, like people, you can use either type of layer to do either type of inking. It's just that I prefer, like, if I'm drawing stuff that's mechanical and requires a lot of straight lines and a lot of precision, that could vectors more easily lend themselves to precision, while organic inking leads itself more easily to like it says, organic forms. But yeah, so what I'm going to focus on first is I'm going to start here at the organic inking, and then I am going to start with all of the mechanical things. So yeah, and any questions that you have that pop up, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. All right. See, and it's only when I start inking that I notice how badly my sketch needs finishing. But that's okay. You can kind of juggle both. It's not against the law. What do I do? My stabilization off. That's why. Stabilization is not a cheat. Feel free to use stabilization. It is just a tool. Like any tool, it can be used and misused. If you want to give yourselves like perfect straight lines without the aid of digital stabilization, the best way to do that is to make a nice, big confident line. One of the things that you can do also is that these joints and stuff, make sure that they join cleanly. And like if there's one line running into another line that could be considered as like underneath it, can kind of flare out. The inking there. And thicken it and kind of give that line a bit more dynamism, so to speak. What I'm doing here also in my inking is that I'm inking with a brush that is locked to its size, no matter the size of zoom that I'm at. So if I zoom out, it's the same size of a brush. And so what that does is that helps me control the size of my brush by doing what I do naturally, is just kind of like grabbing the canvas and rotating it and zooming it. And so if I zoom out, I know I can do the lines a little bit thicker. And so I think that might be what I'll do in this case, actually. I'll make the lines just a little bit thicker. And try and resist the temptation to Control Z to undo what you just did. Like, it'll still happen, but like, and no line or ink work is ever going to be like perfect. So just take it easy on yourself, you know? Inking's one of those things that doesn't have to be stressful. It can be one of those things that, excuse me. It can be one of those things that is relaxing. Because you're putting some final touches on your artwork, or rather, you're finalizing it in a way. No, I want that thicker. I want that line nice and thick. One of the things that you can do is in inking is like anytime that you're varying your line weight, and like if you want to see this more precisely, you can see that this line underneath the wing shape here is thicker than the one on top. That can be a consideration for like lighting. It can also be a consideration for like perspective and how close a thing is, or how far a thing is. But yeah. So the lines on that can be... The lines on the bottom side can be just a little thicker. Whew. That one was shaky. Yeah. Again, the key to making sure that you get like these nice and smooth lines is to approach them with speed and with confidence. And also it can help if you rotate your canvas a bit. Try not to fight your biology, so to speak. If you've got lines that curve outward and your hand just goes in that direction, let it go in that direction, you know? This can be... Actually, I want less of that action and more of that action. And again, if you have questions or anything, just feel free to pop them off. I'm not prepared with any remarks necessarily. Going very off the cuff with this one right now. Should leave that one as it was. So there are a lot of different techniques when it comes to inking. Inking is not necessarily any like one thing you can choose. Like what perhaps what's most important when it comes to inking is that you just make a decision and keep it consistent as possible. Which I have not necessarily done all the time. But do as I say, not as I do, I guess. Whenever you're looking at finishing your piece, like especially if you're looking to flat color a piece, it's always good to go over the very outside of all of your lines, analyze them and make sure that they're all closed. It just helps your fill tool do what you want it to do. It's also important to make sure that I have not done a good job with that. Alright. I might have to go back and redo some of these things because I just remembered these are fuzzy dragons. So I gotta add some fuzz elements in there. And that's okay, this happens. Just gotta make sure that at big joints and bends, you kind of sell the direction of fur and fuzz and stuff. Anyone typing questions? What does it mean? Yeah, no. It's fine. Um, no, it's fine to ask what it means. So, like, anytime that it's how should I explain it? It's an art technique that you choose to use, especially if you're a big fan of like solid lines. Whenever you're putting a layer of ink over a drawing, tracing it, outlining it this way, that's inking. Whenever you're if you've got some unfinished elements of a drawing that you decide to just like fill in with ink at later stages, that's inking. Um, yeah. How often does inking conform to original sketch? Well, pretty often. I mean, like when I'm sketching something, I like to keep my sketches clean. I like to. They always start out messy. Like for an example of like what this looked like in its very first inception, I can bring that out. Uh, it's not in the references. It's in this file. Oh crud! Did I delete it? I might have. Yeah. So Here's one of the earliest incarnations of this idea of two dragons like playing video games at a table with like monitors and stuff facing each other. Um, so this is a very loose sketch, right? Um, and maybe some people are confident enough to come in at this stage and say like, okay, I've got a good enough idea. I'm ready to go in an ink. Um, but I'm not. I like to have things laid out pretty thoroughly before I start putting ink down on the paper. Um, but yeah, so I like to have a fairly finished drawing. But yeah, it looks like I'm missing. I might have drawn over the. I think that's literally what I did is I drew over it. Okay, well, that happens sometimes. I destroyed that one. There's probably a copy on my phone, but I'm not going to dig it up for the sake of this right now. But yeah. No, we started a bit late today, and today is not like really a lecture. It's more of an inking question and answer session because like there's not a whole lot to uh, inking, laying down stuff. Um, you know, try to make your sketch clean to your satisfaction. Like, you know, as I was just saying, some people are super confident with their inks, and whenever they're going into a piece, uh, they just know exactly what they're doing. From like a super loose sketch. Not everybody can operate like that. And again, it's important to remember your subjects. If they has fur, you need to draw that. You need to at least have some indication of it. If I forget that, remind me of it, okay, guys? These are fuzzy dragons. They're not your flat, smooth dragons that you like. That I like. They got a bit of fuzz, a bit of fluff. Whoops. There we go. No, but it's good to ask what it is, to begin with. Like, I come from these things from, like, we all have different experiences, and so we're not all familiar with what all the techniques are. But yeah, inking is just a general. Like, it's an art form of its own sometimes, right? Like, there are people who made, their careers, their livings off of making sure that other people's work looked really good. You can think of comic book inkers. That's probably where inking is most prominent. If I can actually finish my sentences. It's hard to finish sentences. Hmm. Sometimes the solution is not adding, it is taking away. That can be a big, that can be a thing for people, right? Like if you don't know when you're done, like, hey, when am I done? And so you just keep adding and adding and adding stuff. But you just gotta remember that sometimes it's not about what you can put into a drawing. Sometimes it's about what can you leave out of it. Half pixelated line art. Well, so how your stuff is gonna look, like mine looks at pixels at a certain point too, right? So like my stuff can look really, it might be like I'm operating at just like a higher resolution. I'm doing this on my desktop currently. You can't like I have gotten a little bit familiar, a little bit acquainted with drawing on my phone, and I can't operate at the resolutions that I typically like to operate on my phone because it just can't handle it. The memory, there's not enough memory in the phone to handle the size and scale that I operate at. Um, this is this was not a scale chosen by me actually. Was the confines of the project. This was a project specified size that I had to stick with, which is fine. And again, like the so like that's my answer to kind of like pixelation. You know, if you've got stuff like this brush that I'm working with, I don't know if I called it a smooth inker or if it was originally called a smooth inker, but that's what it's called now. But its smoothness is in part due to the settings, and in part due to the resolution that I'm operating at. So like your stuff might look all like super pixely. It just means that you should maybe try experimenting with making your canvas bigger. You know, that's a potential solution. It's not necessarily always a good solution because you have to balance all sorts of needs. Bigger is not always better. Drawing on your phone, uh, like I was saying earlier, drawing on your phone is it's pretty memory intensive to uh, to have really big canvases. Just kind of come in there and clean up some of these vagabond lines. I can come back in here and clean up. Like sometimes there'll be like stray pixels left over when you're done like inking a piece, and if you're trying to be like really clean about it, there's still going to be some like stray gray pixels or like almost white pixels. Whoops. What's the line shape I want? Decision making is another important aspect of it, you know? I come in and I ask myself questions because sometimes what I've drawn is not necessarily what would look good in ink. That is a really thin. Wispy ragamarole. Ragamarole. I'm not even using words anymore. It's hard to think and speak and draw at the same time. No, yeah, I mean, like, for, like, you know, uh, especially, like, if, you know, do less. do do as little as you can get away with, you know? In some respects, you know, that's not always, that's not necessarily always the best idea is to do as little as you can get away with. But sometimes it's sufficient, you know? Like, the idea of fur can be conveyed by, uh, having these scraggly bits at the joints and the segments and the big bendy areas, you know? But if you don't need it in your drawing, don't put it there. And that's easier said than done sometimes. Because you'll get wrapped up in a project and you'll be like, but it needs this, this, and that. Shh, no, it doesn't. Not always. Calm thy nerves. You don't always need everything in an image. Alright. I want that. Whoops. I want that line just a. Whoops. Nope. I'm not cutting things. I am trying to undo them because the lines might not be coming out the way that I want them to. Yeah, that's good enough. Oh, yeah. So, like, here I've got kind of an unfinished, like, I haven't really drawn anything here, right? Like, when that's something to try and keep in mind while you're sketching. But in some respects, like, as long as you can kind of, like, give a good enough guess of what a thing should look like, sometimes that's good enough. So I'm gonna do some fur tufts here, and then follow that line out, and then all right, and then maybe I think that arm's like that's looking a little thick, so maybe thin that arm up some by bringing that out. Yeah, and then if it doesn't look as good from there. There we go. That's probably. And whatever. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. back in here. I'm gonna get really tight on this. Again, because like I don't know when people are coming in. If you missed it earlier, I like to go in. I like to work, or rather, I'm experimenting, working with brushes that stay constrained to the size of the canvas. Maybe I'll look at this one day and be like, why did I make that decision? But that's the point of experimentation. You don't always know what's going to come out. Sometimes you gotta call good enough good enough. Yeah, and some spaces like so faces are especially important when you're coming into ink. The more lines you add to a face, the more you age it. You make a face look much older than than you necessarily intended when you add a bunch of lines to it. If you get a little bit overzealous in your line work. Come out here and do the underside of this ear a little thicker than the upper side of this ear. And the ultimate judge of whether like something works out or not, you gotta zoom out and just take a look at it and say like, oh hey, that really works, or hey, you know what? There's some serious stuff missing, which in this case there is because there are some mechanical aspects that I haven't drawn. But I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it. Pressure. Even on traditional, sometimes screw the pressure up. Very soft to very hard. Oh yeah. Now, when it comes to controlling the pressure that you push something down with, pressure sensitivity and so forth. One way to train yourself in that, and make yourself a little bit better, is to work with harder pencils. If you're making like vary the hardness of the pencils that you're working with in traditional. I think that's the best way to kind of train this. Like I have kind of a very light touch, and part of that is natural, but part of that is because I worked with darker pencils, and like if I pressed too darkly, if I pressed too hard, too darkly, if I press too hard, it's not gonna it's gonna come out too dark, and I don't want that. You don't necessarily want that. No, I don't want that. I don't want a wavery line either. I want a nice, smooth one. we go. And it's okay if it's a little heavier underneath. That's where the shadows are anyway. So like light and shadow are considerations that you can take while drawing as well. There we go. And there's also just like letting good enough be good enough, you know? I don't know if what I said there made any sense. Very soft to very hard. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like it's good that you're aware. You know, if you're aware of that there's a that you have uh, pressure issues, that's something that you can notice and work on. All right, there we go. We got one complete-ish looking dragon. And we can see that parts are lower. You know, parts that are lower. We varied. I varied the line width by locking my brush to the size that I was working on the canvas, and so I tried to be cognizant of that to come in to get a little bit further from the canvas when I wanted big thick lines, and get a little bit closer when I wanted thinner lines. It's always good to do a once over on the outline and look at that. And some people like if you're doing a super cartoony looking work, like my stuff definitely leans towards cartoony. So I've done this in the past, but like sometimes cartoonists will go back in over just the outline and make it an extra thick outline, and that's one way to really separate characters from backgrounds. You know, to really you're literally drawing the line between the characters in the background and saying like, hey, clear boundaries. But yeah. And you know, like, you know, the style considerations are all very personal, you know. So like what you like isn't necessarily what other people like. But you know what? That's just there are going to be differences between people always. So yeah. How long has this been going for? 40 minutes? Okay, we can go on. I think I'll come back in and I'll do some technical stuff so I can finish kind of the lower part of this piece first. So I'll come back in and I'll do some mechanical inking. Now, when you're doing things like mechanically, you're going to be using a lot of straight lines and rigid materials and whatnot. Let's see here. How do I want to do this? I want to make sure that I have a nice and thin line. Yeah, I'm going to come in and have a nice thin line because I can always work up thicker if I want to. I'm going to go over this outside. I'm going to say right there. I'm going to draw a very straight line down here. Actually, I'm going to take that line even further. because otherwise the chair starts to make no sense. And this can happen too. Sometimes, like, you've drawn something and then, like, upon second look, you're like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. So you can come back and say, like, no, I want things to be this way. Alright, coming in too close. Coming in too close. That's some old habits showing up. I wanted to keep my lines. You know what? I'm just going to start there. Does that line work if I do that? Well, let's see what happens. Okay. I am discovering that I want much more accurate curves. That's much more accurate. Alright. There we go. And we can do straight lines too. I guess is off this way. And then since these are vector lines, one of the neat things that you can do is you can just select them, copy them, paste them, and move them so that you maintain perfectly consistent lines. Amazing. I'm gonna say I want that more like that. All right. Yeah, I mean, you typically oh, in erasing this is gonna be a bit different. So I need an eraser is what I need. Is this gonna do what I think it does? And whatever. Sometimes close enough's gotta be close enough. And then sometimes you're just like, no, that's not good enough. I'm going to come back in here and alter this because it must be perfect. I'm going to keep that. I altered that angle a little bit. So I'm going to draw that up there. That's the benefit of working in vectors. So you can change the line after you've drawn it. And some people love vectors so much that that's all they work in. And to which people I say, like, good job, live your dreams. Not everybody can do that. So here on these, on this part of it's like a computer chair. I've kind of taken a creative direction here and saying, like, oh yeah, it's a computer chair designed around dragons. And so, like, this part is the cushion. And so I'm coming in a little bit. I can just do that. I'm operating on vectors. I need to remember that I'm doing that. What the heck was that? Okay, that line's not perfect, but I can take it somewhere. I can take it elsewhere. Good enough. This is a great thing with vectors, is that you can just kind of come back and say like, no, I want that this way. And you change their direction a little bit. And you make them line up a little bit nicer. Because why not make it look nice, you know? Come back in here. Oh, that's good. So I can just bring that in there. That's there. That's there and there. Oh, something's going on here. Got a little out of whack, little out of control there. That's okay, I'll bring it right back. There we go. Wanted to make that erase the whole line. And when I'm coming back to organic inking, I can go back to my organic layer and overlap the stuff that I didn't want. Alright, and since you cannot necessarily see the dragon's tushy from here, that looks more or less complete. Let's have a look at it without the sketch. Ah, it looks pretty good. I think so anyway. I'll maybe come back in and see, like, there might be some spaces where, like, here specifically, I've got like an inconsistency in the line thickness. You can come back in there and fix that if you put your brush to the right color setting. What the heck is going on there? Oh, it's still stuck on the eraser tool. Excuse me. I'm going a little bit crazy. I'm going to boost up the size of that a bit because I moved back to organics. I switched tools. Oops. And there'll also be like tiny places like this where like, oh, I didn't realize I didn't close that line. That probably wouldn't have meant, you know, too much hassle for a fill tool or a paint bucket tool. In Clip Studio anyways. Clip Studio's paint buckets are really, really good at closing gaps. It's one of the reasons I love this program. I'm not here to sell it to you, but I'm going to sell it to you anyways. If you're looking for something you don't have to pay a license fee for, Clip Studio Paint is darn good software. That said, the tools do not make the artist. The artist makes the artist. And something that an artist is not strong in is not going to be aided by any amount of tools. Alright, that's fairly well put together. I might come in here and thicken this line up a bit. But yeah, once you've got your entire figure figured out, ha ha ha, unintentional pun, you'll want to look over it and see, like, are there any glaring, are there any, like, so I'm looking at this line and I'm thinking, like, I don't really like how this line goes. It's okay. You can go in, redo it. Let's give myself an advantage. All right. There we go. Da, da, da. I get a bit crazy about my rotations being off. I wish Control 0 would fix that. Oh, people are talking. Sorry. Settings, stabilizer. Stabilizer settings. Wasn't here for the question. I'm curious too, how liberal are you if you change the line art from the sketch? A lot of times I completely change some proportions. Should I be resketching? So like if you get to the line art stage, and you're changing stuff like the size of a person's head or their hand or something like that, I think that can really screw up the way that your inks look. I think that like and this is again a reason why I prefer to start from like a mostly clean sketch. Like this isn't like the cleanest, but like I've got a bunch of distinct lines and I can tell where stuff begins and ends for the most part. There's some things that are a mess that I can kind of guess my way around, like the wings here. But there are some things that I don't want to be guessing my way around, like a hand or a face. I don't want to be guessing at those parts. I don't want to be guessing at their proportions either once I reach that size. So, like, if you need to resize stuff, do it in the sketching phase. If you get to the inking phase, and you need to resize something, try not to resize your inks because that can make him kind of muddy and inconsistent. I hope that answers the question you were asking. But yeah, try to catch as many of those like proportion problems in sketching as you can, and then like try to let inking just be inking, because if you're fixing things in inking, you it's a little it's a little backwards. It's a little cart before the horsey type of thing. So like you want to make sure that your sketch is a solid foundation, and that you're inking on top of stuff that's pretty solid. And then sometimes you can change stuff. Like there'll be things where it'll be like, oh, I forgot a detail here with like how thick I wanted this wing, for example. You know, not not and I chose to do something different than what was in the sketch because the sketch was not complete there. But the sketch didn't necessarily need to be complete there, you know. And what is and isn't necessary is gonna depend on like who you are and what you're doing, what your preferences are. But yeah. All right. Oh, excuse me. I've been going for about a good hour now, and I think that's a fairly good inking demonstration, if I may say so myself. I got something that's nice and clean. Here, let me get rid of my grid here so you can just see the dragon. But yeah, it's nice and clean. It varies the line width in a consistent way. Things that are like beneath or in shadow are typically have thicker lines, and those things that are going to be exposed to light are on the upper have thinner lines. The finer the details are, the thinner the lines are. Um, the more technical things are, the less they vary in line width. I tried to be very consistent in my line width with this chair here. But yeah. Yeah, cool. Alright, yeah. Oh, thanks so much. I didn't realize so many people had joined. Thanks for coming by. I'm sorry this wasn't quite as informative as a lecture, but I hope that it worked somewhat as a demonstration. And I hope to do a few more things of these because I find that my lectures are very word heavy and they're very idea heavy and they're not very practice heavy or demonstration heavy, and I think I'd like to change that a bit. But yeah, whoops, whoops. And nothing will be perfect. It's just you gotta let some things go sometimes, and you also have to remember the final output of the thing. Um, if you're trying to fit your entire thing on a screen, you have to keep in mind its size on the screen. In this case, this is going to go into a book, so it's going to be printed so. Its true resolution digitally is this, which is way larger than the book is going to be. But and here I am finding little things to correct. That will happen a lot. Yeah, but you want to be correcting small things. You don't typically want to be correcting big things. And then if you're going through this again, I decide oh hey, maybe I want this a little more consistent in line with the decision that I made on the opposite wing. Stuff like that. Tons of considerations. Lots of fun to be had. Whoops. Let's be a little more confident, a little more smooth there. I'm not operating at a advantage like I should be. Give yourself an advantage, Nick. Don't draw against what your grain is. There we go. That's quite a bit better. I decided I wanted to thicken up that some. And maybe thin this down some, but I don't know. I can fidget with it later. Honestly. Right now I'm kind of fidgeting and maybe I should stop because there is a point of diminishing returns. Where it's not actually getting better with your effort. You're just polishing. And polishing is good, not necessarily bad, but there's an upper limit to everything. Alright. Yeah. Watching people and especially watching them and having them explain in real time, I hope is helpful to you. You want to see me try painting? Okay, well, I'm not much of a painter because my jam is more cell shaded, comic booky looking stuff. But maybe I'll come back once the line art is done here, the line art is the project. So I'm not required to color this, but maybe I'll come back and do a coloring demonstration. That sounds fairly fun, right? Cool. All right. With that, I'm gonna wrap up the video. Yeah, it looks like we're over an hour. I hope people have enjoyed this on YouTube. If those of you who have been enjoying this on YouTube, like it, like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube things, and I will see you next week for another stream. Maybe it'll be a lecture, maybe it'll be a demonstration. I'm not so sure. I'll try to be better about planning stuff like that. But ciao. That is the end of the recording.